What is up, guys? What is funny? Why is it okay for some people to joke about some things while others get hauled over the coals of supposed cancel culture for saying broadly the same thing? What's up? I'm Abe Thompson, a former and sometimes stand-up whose dreams of hitting the comedy big time were mercilessly crushed by fatherhood. Marooned in the sticks where I could barely afford a house, I found myself no longer able to stay out late in basement venues for open mics to test new jokes, so instead I started a podcast, and more recently expanded into doing videos like this. So, funny, comedians, stand-up, offense. Let's start with some context. Now, recently you may have noticed the outrage at comedians has increased by quite a margin. Ricky Gervais, Dave Chappelle, Matt Rife are, I suppose, the most obvious, most recent examples of stand-up comedians drawing on sensitive political areas to try to get laughs from what they perceive to be shock value. Now, that in and of itself, it's not really anything that new. For as long as there's been stand-up, then there has been shock value. When the end of the pier guy used to crack jokes about his mother-in-law, even though that would come off as the most hack joke in existence today, back then when that was the style, that would have earned gasps from the audience, like, oh my god, what is his wife gonna say? How could he say that about his own mother-in-law? He's gonna be in for an earful when he gets in. Equally, you had Richard Pryor making jokes about his own drug use, or mocking white people. And like back then, I'm sure that there were people that would be saying that this is not okay, or it's racist, or it's trivializing, or mocking people with serious addiction issues. Because, you know, back then, that was shocking. Or maybe not, I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny. But the point is, there has always been shock in the arena of stand-up. And that shocking people with acerbic language or description isn't in itself necessarily like a bad thing. I mean, here's how it can sometimes work. Like, say you're gonna sort of build up a paragraph and you spend like a minute or a minute and a half talking about topic A, but then in the last 5 words, you smash it down and it turns out the whole time you were talking about topic B. Like, that is a type of joke and it always works well. Always has done, always will. But that is not what we're talking about when we're talking about the shock factor or offense that we have seen of late. So what is that now? And why is it so bad now? You know, why can't Matt Rife walk on stage and open his special with a joke at the expense of a victim of domestic violence? Like, that's not okay. But a mother-in-law joke also used to not be okay. Now it is. So won't this end? Like, isn't it all part of the same shock factor technique? And the answer is no, not really. Like, if you're going to ridicule someone for their appearance, like Rife does in that routine, the someone you're ridiculing has to be in a better socio-economic position to you. You know, you can only punch up. You can't punch down. That is the rule. That is why it's okay for Richard Pryor and Chris Rock to mock white people, but frankly, it doesn't play so well when it's a white guy cracking jokes at a black guy's expense. Gotta punch up. You can't punch down. That is why, how do I say this? That is why a larger-than-life character on a stage can take the mick out of this skinny bitch over here. But if a relatively thin woman starts walking on stage and cracking jokes about a larger-than-life character in the audience, everybody's gonna feel weird about that. You can't punch down. You have to punch up. It's all about who is the underdog, or who is perceived to be the underdog within the context of the joke. So if you're Matt Rife and you open your special with a joke at the expense of the appearance of what you perceive to be a victim of domestic violence, who do you think is the underdog in that situation? So it does not work. It's going to make people feel weird because you as a man are inarguably in a better socio-economic position than a woman. And even in the joke, like the setup, think about the characters in the joke. You're a man in a restaurant being served by a woman, and a woman who is recovering from some sort of assault. You are not the underdog. Can't punch down. You gotta punch up. So what of Ricky Gervais and what of Dave Chappelle? So again, these are established comedians. These are millionaires. These are men who are seeking to extract humor, targeting those who are less fortunate. Now, I'm just going to be really brutally honest. Dave Chappelle, at times, I found some of his routines of late kind of funny. Like, he did a thing about how he stood behind feminism, how he wanted to champion it, to show other men that it's the right cause to pursue, and that he would do that for women. For women everywhere. And all he asks is that you suck his you know? And then he's like, oh, and now we're back to square one, I guess. Which is like, you know, it's a childish joke. It's kind of silly. But it's also beautifully written if you're a fan of stand-up comedy. Like, it's leading you up that garden path with a minute or a minute and a half where you think he's going into something resembling ultra-progressive kind of territory. And then at that last juncture, smash down, and you're in a place that you weren't quite expecting. And really, it's a joke about, I mean, look, this is just how I interpreted it. It's a joke about a certain class or type of comedian who professes to be a male feminist ultra, but quite transparently as a means to get fed up female comedians to come and sleep with him. Which, I mean, I could make a whole video about that, but I would almost certainly get sued for it. So with Chappelle, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, you know, it's not really my bag. And can't this greatest of all time comedian find some way to channel his talents into a place where he's punching up? But also there's some funny bits, and also there's some actually quite moving stuff within Chappelle's specials. With Gervais, I don't think it's as easy to intellectualize or give him a pass. Like, I know a lot of people love Gervais for The Office and for the stuff he did at the Golden Globes, but that is actually kind of my point. Because when Gervais originally wrote The Office with Stephen Merchant, it was kind of punching up against corporate culture, appraisals and goals, role-play workshops and area managers. But I suppose, you know, broadly speaking, it felt like he was punching up against people who take themselves too seriously. And then when he was hosting the Golden Globes, it felt like he was punching up again against multi-millionaire celebrities, roasting Tom Cruise, mocking Mel Gibson, taking people with huge egos, like, down a few notches. But what is his latest work doing? You know, who is he pushing back against? Who is he punching up to? The answer is nobody. It's like now he is the multi-millionaire, like, several times over. But instead of wielding that power to, you know, I don't know, hold the government to account, or to take the mick out of people even richer than he's using that power and influence to punch down on people who are inarguably less fortunate than he is. And so again, that comedic contract is broken. And this is the thing, right? I don't expect everyone to agree with me with what I'm about to say. I expect that a lot of people watching this will be like, oh, it sounds like you're too sensitive. You know, just let people laugh at what they want to laugh at, and you enjoy the stand-up comedians that you enjoy. There's always going to be things that you think that this guy shouldn't joke about, just like there's always going to be things that this lady thinks that you shouldn't find funny. But here is the thing, right? I personally, this is just my belief, you can take it or leave it. I personally believe you can joke about absolutely anything. Like, literally any subject out there. Reasonable people will disagree with me and make good, solid cases why I'm talking rubbish, I'm sure. But that is my personal belief, rooted in years on the London circuit. Having seen great comedians bomb and terrible comedians just magically get away with something. I've seen every variant and awful tribute act to every single comedian you could name. And honestly, I've never been more sure of it. Every single joke or topic you can think of, someone out there has done it successfully, while others have gone up 2 days later, done pretty much the same joke, eaten shit, and left crying. I think good, battle-worn comedians can find a way to joke about any subject on the table. Like, you could take a really uncomfortable subject, but then just use that as a metaphor for something else. You could take something that happened to you, but then just crack jokes about the perpetrator. Like, you're still joking about that subject, but the dynamics are more generous to you. Like, even if it's a subject that you, as a white, middle-class man from the home counties, shouldn't typically be able to joke about, you could spend the first 13 minutes of your set getting the audience on your side, peppering your set with references to your leftism, and then that would give you some space to then crack a ludicrously offensive joke. Because by that point, the audience know that you're not actually that guy. So I guess my point is, like, there's ways and tactics and strategies and rules for how you can do this. But if your whole act is just you saying mean things just for the sake of it, well, then it's like, okay, people are shocked over here, but it's like there's no dynamics to it. I just feel like it's like I'm bored, Like, you're not using it as a metaphor, you're not punching up against the perpetrator. Like, this is literally just badness for the sake of badness. Like, when people get caught on a hot mic or a clip from an interview comes out and it blows up in their face and they're like, whoa, no, wait, it was taken out of context. Well, I feel like with comedians like this, where their whole act is just meanness for the sake of meanness, I feel like you didn't add the context. Like, that's why it's weird. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this new trend of kind of holding comedians to account. I do think it's weird that in this day and age, we appear to hold comedians to a higher standard than political figures. I think of all the nutty stuff that Donald Trump has come out with. He's all like, grab them by the, right? And I don't want any Muslims flying into America. Now he's talking about building a succession of detention camps for all the illegals. This is the guy that's going to be your president again. And yet, where is the pop culture conversation? It's like, oh, what has Dave Chappelle said now? Do you guys agree with me? Do you think you can joke about actually anything? Because the meritocratic nature of comedy, like, you would learn pretty quickly what can and can't be joked about by you and your face, your voice and your accent. Or maybe you think there are some subjects that are just totally off limits. Like, you have to respect that some people out there have gone through some things, and how would it make them feel if they were in the audience and you were joking about that kind of experience? But I always look at that like this is a very selfish way to operate. But I always look at it like, if it makes a room of 200 people laugh and this one person is upset by it, I kind of feel like the original perpetrator of that experience that we're talking about, I feel like I'm sorry he ruined that stand-up for you. Do you know what I mean? Maybe I'm giving myself a get out of jail free card there. Finally, do you agree that there are some problematic elements with people like Gervais or Chappelle? Or maybe you think they're all perfect and everyone's just making a big fuss over nothing? As always, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, right now I've got to go and physically assault my mother-in-law, which might sound not okay, but I can assure you she is significantly above me on the socioeconomic ladder. So it's fine. Peace.